three early thoughts on what might be different for Oregon versus Indiana in the college football playoffs. Obviously, this team played on October 11th. Indiana got the win 30-20. Oregon was the favorite in that game. In this one on FanDuel, Indiana is the favorite by 4.5. The under over set at 47.5. What will 90 days do to make this matchup different? Well, we saw the Ole Miss Georgia game. A lot of people thought that one wouldn't be different. Maybe there would be some motivation for Ole Miss, but from a fantastic performance by Trinidad Chambliss, and not just him. I mean, there were plenty of other guys on that team that did a fantastic job, but just kind of some of the circus stuff he was able to do. And that one really showed how much this Ole Miss team wanted to win this one and how fantastic it was for them. So super good performance by them. Very happy for Ole Miss. And if you're an Oregon fan, you love to see that because you're saying, okay, if Ole Miss can get the get back on Georgia, then maybe Oregon can get the get back on Indiana. We're going to talk through some of this stuff, kind of get you some of my thoughts. And then I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section, what you think about this game early on. Do you think any of the three things I say here are meaningful? Do they, if you're an Oregon fan, do they excite you? If you're an Indiana fan, do they make you nervous? Or vice versa. If you're an Oregon fan, do these not excite you? If you're an Indiana fan, do these make you excited? So let me know in the comments what you think there. Number one, both teams have grown and gained more experience. So Oregon is a very young team. In fact, their team is made up of 70 freshmen and sophomores. That is 70 out of 112 on their roster. 62.5% of their team are freshmen and sophomores. Well, freshmen, redshirt freshmen, and sophomores. That is absolutely crazy. We talked about the youth of this Oregon team. They're not quite as young as like a Nebraska or a Michigan or a Maryland is this season, but still one of the youngest teams in the country that's been contending for a national championship. I don't have all the numbers on like the SEC and in Miami and stuff like that, but they are they are a very young team in college football, and so the youth of this team to be able to go throughout the entire season. They were only playing for about a month and a half before they faced Indiana. And don't get me wrong, I'm not using that as an excuse. Indiana won that game, but I am saying that with some more time to play and some more time for the coaches to kind of understand their team, and in addition to that, you have 8 transfers starting on this team as well. So only 8 and those are only transfers from this year. I mean, Dante Moore transferred in 2 years ago, so you could add him to the number as well if you wanted to. But 8 transfers that came in this year. Oregon's coaches are starting to understand their team better, their roster, what they do better. So the whole thought process is, can Oregon pull off what Ole Miss pulled off against Georgia? I think the difference here is that Indiana is a much better team than Georgia, in my opinion. But I also think Oregon is a better team than Ole Miss. So this can be a very interesting thing, especially when you think about my number 2 point, which is Dante Moore, who has seen this Indiana secondary before. One thing I've noticed in basically every single game that Indiana has played is that the quarterbacks come out being confused at what they're seeing downfield. It was very, very evident in that game against Indiana or Ohio State against the Indiana. Julian Sand, yes, he got sacked multiple times, but some of that was also just coverage sacks because Julian Sand couldn't figure out where to go with the ball. He was trying to go deep and he was seeing things that he hadn't seen before. And if the Big Ten didn't care if I brought up all 22, I'd bring up the all 22 and show you. But there was coverage happening downfield that he was not getting pre-snap, he was not getting during the snap, and then he was not getting while he was being sacked back there. One of the crazy things that Indiana is able to do is actually some of the stuff that Ohio State has done is being able to switch up their zone and their man coverage together, being able to work those two things together, being able to have half of your team, well, not half, but some of your players playing zone and some of your players playing man. It's absolutely fantastic work by Bryant Haines and just goes to show how much of a defensive mastermind he is. And I want to see, what does that look like? What does Bryant Haines have more for Dante Moore or in this one? Or is he going to try to come out with some similar stuff? And is Dante Moore going to be more used to what happened there? And if he is, that would be huge for them. And also, we have to think about what Oregon looked like on third down. That was their worst performance of the season on third down, 21.4% third down conversion percentage. The only problem is that they had their now worst third down conversion rate of the season against Texas Tech, 21% in that game. So even worse against Texas Tech than it was. I believe they were 4 of 19 in that one, and they were 3 of 14 against Indiana. But Moore did do better, and the offensive line did do better on third down. Even though the conversion rate was worse, you still saw better play. Dante Moore was 4 of 7 for 64 yards against Indiana, but he was sacked 3 times on third down. Against Texas Tech, Moore was 7 of 9, and he was only sacked 1 time against Texas Tech, and that was with more third down conversion. Uh, Pieces there. And Texas Tech has David Bailey and other guys on there that are just really, really special edge rushers. And I'm not saying that Indiana doesn't have special edge rushers. Don't get me wrong. But Stephen Daly is out now. And how much is that going to impact things? Didn't really seem to impact things very much against Alabama, but I also think Alabama has a much, much worse offensive line than what Oregon has. Sorry, Alabama fans, if you're continuing to watch this channel, you might not like that comment. And then I'll say finally, my third point here kind of goes into what I just talked about, but will the O line be better for Oregon in this one? I think Oregon has a much better offensive line than Alabama, but the last time they played IU, it did not look great. I think something that a lot of people don't realize that Oregon's offensive line was able to do pretty well in that game was they actually did do a pretty good job of run blocking. They had 4.8 yards per carry sack adjusted. One of the issues was the passing game and how much Dante Moore was sacked in the second half of that game. They allowed 6 sacks and 8 tackles for loss. They allowed 24 total quarterback pressures in that game, and their offensive line at home had 3 penalties in that game as well. So this was one of those games for Oregon that was not their best offensive line performance of the season. It was coming after a Wisconsin game where the offensive line was not great in the first half, but that Wisconsin front seven is better than people give credit for. And so there was a little bit more understanding there, especially when you get into the rain and some of that other stuff. But there is a difference between Texas Tech and Indiana. Texas Tech comes at you much more straightforward, kind of trusting their guys to beat the individual offensive linemen. And they did beat Oregon's offensive linemen. In the first half, that was pretty evident, but in the second half, that got cleaned up much more, and I think Oregon really adjusted and did much better. That's why, obviously, you saw more scoring in the second half for Oregon there. But Indiana, they come at you from all angles. They come at you with stunts and twists and all different kinds of things they throw at you. They really aim to confuse you and then overpower you. And that's not to say that they can't overpower you at all, but it's just some of the schematical things that Bryant Haines does with this defense, with this defensive line, and also getting the linebackers in play as well. If Oregon can find a way to really stretch this team when they're putting 2, 3 linebackers on the field, maybe lining up Kenyon Sadiq and Jamari Johnson both on the outside, making the linebackers have to get out of the box and cover those guys, that could be a whole lot more beneficial in this game for them. But the issue is if you do that, then you're leaving this offensive line against a really good pass rush in Indiana that does an excellent job of confusing the Oregon team. And so that's my other question is, has the Oregon offensive line learned from the first meeting to be able to say, okay, these are the kind of stunts and twists they're going to be throwing at us. Can we combat those things? Or does Bryant Haines have more for him, right? Does Bryant Haines have more to be able? Yeah, I'm going to give you, you thought you saw it all in the first meeting. Let's see what it looks like in this one. I'm absolutely fascinated with this matchup. I do have Indiana getting the win early in this one. I still feel like they are the best team in the nation at this point, but I do think that Oregon could have an advantage. I don't know if they do, but I think they could have an advantage of this game and playing a team twice. They always say it's hard to beat a team 2 times, and we saw that with Ole Miss and Georgia. Could we see that again in this one with Indiana and Oregon? Let me know your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear what you guys think.